Okay, so this is pretty big news. The Daily Wire is calling it a bombshell report here. So, the headline is FBI DHS warned about Antifa in early 2016. Obama said nothing. So the reason I'm going to be reading this article is because I know a lot of you prefer audiovisual content rather than just reading articles on your own. And I know that this news wouldn't get out to as many people as it would if I didn't read it. In a bombshell, Politico reported on Friday that the federal government has been worrying about the rise of Antifa since, quote, early 2016, and even labeled their activities, quote, domestic terrorist violence. Yet the Obama administration said nothing publicly about Antifa despite ample opportunity to do so. Over on the Politico report, we see that authorities believed in April of 2016 that anarchist extremists, aka Antifa, were the primary instigators of violence at public rallies against a range of targets. So the alt-right has always been, when pitted up against Antifa, the left likes to say that it's generally those on the right, it's the neo-Nazis, it's the white supremacists that are the ones instigating the violence in the first place. Well, now we see here government-confirmed unreported documents that claim otherwise. Over at the Daily Wire, we see that the FBI noted violence by Antifa in places like Texas, Oregon, and California. Like in the Sacramento, California white supremacist rally when Antifa protesters came looking for violence and, quote, engaged in several activities indicating proficiency in pre-operational planning to include organizing carpools to travel to different locations, raising bail money in preparation for arrests, counter-surveilling law enforcement using three-man scout teams, using handheld radios for communication, and coordinating the event via social media. So that comes from the Department of Homeland Security. So any of the violence committed by Antifa, and now we see is originally instigated by Antifa, is clearly premeditated to the point where it is starting to look like a terrorist organization. That is what Antifa really has evolved into at this point. I mean, look at all the planning that the government, that the DHS report has Antifa doing. And from the report, we see here that some Antifa members have, quote, gone overseas to train and fight with their fellow anarchist organizations. So this is starting to, you see this with Islamist terrorists a lot, right? They would go overseas to the Middle East where they would train and fight with people in the Islamic State, for instance. But it's gotten to the point where now Antifa is doing this. This is insane, and this is all on American soil. That's where the violence is taking place. So Ben Shapiro, the author of the article, asked a very valid question. So, where the hell was President Obama while all of this was building? Remember, in April 2009, shortly after Obama took office, the Department of Homeland Security, under the auspices of Janet Napolitano, issued a report stating that, quote, right-wing extremism was on the rise and labeling anti-abortion and anti-immigration groups as suspect. The report specifically called out the prospect of lone wolf terrorism from those who agreed with, quote, right-wing viewpoints. The report was shockingly vague, but the Obama administration stood by it. So compare that vague report about lone wolf terrorism from right-wing extremists to the very specific report in 2016 crafted by the federal government about Antifa. Now, mind you, that report, of course, is very specific, yet the Obama administration didn't say a word. Instead, they focused on denouncing anti-immigration groups, saying, but in some cases, anti-immigration or strident pro-enforcement fervor has been directed against specific groups and has the potential to turn violent. So in the eyes of the Obama administration, right-wing speech that has the, quote, potential to turn violent is much more important to denounce than actionable violence that has been a manifestation of radical left-wing views. So mind you, this violence, of course, has already happened in those three states listed, yet the Obama administration felt it necessary to condemn violence that hasn't happened yet. Here's the end. President Obama had the opportunity to speak out against left-wing violent movements, to single out Antifa, to disassociate with them, to call them out, in the same way Nancy Pelosi did this week, the same way that President Trump has been asked endlessly to call out white supremacist violence. Obama didn't. Instead, he remained silent on Antifa. Now, in the article, Ben mentions Nancy Pelosi as one of the folks on the left that has been able to successfully call out and disassociate herself with Antifa. that's probably one of the only good things Nancy Pelosi has ever done in her entire life. Unfortunately, as Ben notes here, mainstream Democrats haven't been doing the same. Many of them have been, in fact, embracing them thanks to the mainstream media's ancillary support, like CNN puff pieces, for example.